Dust devils danced across the baked earth of Lone Mesa as the evening sun burned low. Inside the narrow cabin on the edge of the ranch, Elena knelt on the floor, her hands gripping the wooden planks. She had married into the Calderon family, believing she'd found stability after years of working as a seamstress. Instead, she had been treated as an outsider, her gentle manners mocked, her accent ridiculed, and her kindness mistaken for weakness. That morning, her husband rode off without a word, leaving her alone with his two sisters and his mother. By dusk, the women cornered her in the barn, accusing her of dishonoring the family, of not being pure enough for their bloodline. Before she could escape, they dragged her into a chair and sheared her long black hair, laughing as the strands fell like ink to the dirt. When they were done, they pushed her outside, her scalp raw, her dignity stripped, and whispered for the whole town to see, shame her. Half stumbling, half running across the pasture, Elena reached the fence line. Her reflection in the watering trough stared back at her, pale, bruised, shorn. Rage and humiliation swirled in her chest. She was thinking of disappearing into the desert, forever when hoofbeats thundered. Behind her, a tall man on a bay stallion reined in sharply, a broad-shouldered rancher, dust on his hat and steel in his eyes. He was Mateo Vargas, owner of the neighboring spread, known for rescuing strays, both animals and people, but feared for his uncompromising sense of justice. Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low but dangerous. Elena tried to answer, but a sob escaped instead. Mateo swung down from the saddle, his boots crunching on gravel. He took off his coat and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. "You don't belong with them," he said. "They've marked you, but you're not ruined." She whispered that she had nowhere to go. Mateo's jaw tightened. "Then you're coming with me," he said, and there was no room for argument. With surprising gentleness, he lifted her into the saddle and mounted behind her. As they rode toward his ranch house, the sun dipped below the mesa, painting the sky in blood-red streaks. Elena felt the weight of shame begin to shift into something else, an ember of hope, flickering under her ribs. The Vargas ranch smelled of leather, hay, and coffee at dawn. Elena awoke in a clean bed, the sound of clucking hens outside. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Yet safety didn't erase the humiliation or the questions. Why had her husband abandoned her? Would the town believe she deserved what happened? Mateo entered carrying a tray of food. "Eat," he said simply. She tried to thank him, but he waved it off. "You don't owe me gratitude. You owe yourself strength." He offered her work on the ranch, feeding foals, stitching tack so she could rebuild her independence. Each day she grew steadier. Her hair began to fuzz back, her posture straightened, and her eyes lost the hunted look. The Daitudusa ranch hands respected her. Some even whispered she was the heart of the place. But the Calderons weren't done. Word reached the Vargas ranch that Elena's in-laws were calling her a thief, trying to seize her dowry and threatening to drag her back. Mateo listened quietly, then said, "They won't take you, but you have to decide if you'll run forever or stand." The next Sunday, during the town market, Elena rode with Mateo at her side. Whispers rippled through the crowd as she dismounted, head held high despite the uneven regrowth of her hair. She walked straight to the Calderon stall. "I am not your shame," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am your witness." When her sister-in-law tried to slap her, Mateo stepped between them, his hand hovering near the revolver at his hip, not to draw it, but to remind them of consequences. The sheriff, who had seen enough, declared the Calderons' claims void. Publicly stripped of power, they turned and fled. In that moment, Elena realized the rancher had not only rescued her body, but had lent her courage until her own returned. Back at the Vargas ranch that night, she sat on the porch watching the stars. Mateo joined her, silent as always, until finally he said, "This place can be yours too, if you choose it." She looked at him, this man who had refused to pity her and instead had demanded her dignity, and she saw not a savior but a partner. "I choose myself," she said first, then added softly, "and maybe this." Mateo's rare smile flashed. Quick and bright, autumn settled over Lone Mesa. turning the scrub into gold and the evenings crisp. Elena now moved about the Vargas ranch, like she belonged there, her hands sure on the reins, her laughter echoing with the ranch hands as she taught them the old songs from her childhood. Yet inside, she still carried a flicker of unease. Freedom, she'd learned, is not simply being safe, it's daring to dream again. One late afternoon, while she was mending a saddle beneath the cottonwoods, a messenger galloped in. A wildfire had broken out in the northern canyons and was tearing toward the grazing pastures where dozens of calves were penned. Mateo saddled up immediately, but Elena stepped into his path. "You'll need another rider," she said. "I know the shortcut through. Devil's Pass." He hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. Side by side they rode hard into the burning wind, smoke staining the sky orange. When they reached the canyon, flames licked the dry grass, and terrified calves bunched against the fence. Elena leapt from her horse, swinging the gate open while Mateo drove the herd toward the riverbed. Sparks bit at her skin. The heat roared in her ears. She remembered the night she'd been shorn and shamed, how small she had felt. This time she stood tall, her voice cutting through the chaos as she whistled and clapped, guiding the animals to safety. Hours later, covered in soot, they watched the last embers die in the wet sand by the river. Mateo looked at her with something new in his eyes, not just respect, but recognition. "You're not the woman I found by the fence that night," he said quietly. "No," she answered, chest still heaving. "I'm the woman I was meant to be." Back at the ranch, the hands greeted her as a hero. Elena washed the smoke from her hair in the cool pump water and felt the strands, thicker now, curling around her fingers like living proof of her resilience. She caught her reflection in the window, not a victim, but a rancher in her own right. And when Mateo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, she didn't shrink back. She stood beside him as an equal, looking out over the land they'd saved together.